Welcome to Between the Lines. I am Traci Hunter Abramson, and I am here with Sean M. Bessie, Esther Hatch, and Sarah M. Eden. And today we are going to be talking about book signings and events and how authors really feel about them. We'll also share what happens behind the scenes. But first, before we go there, does anyone have any book news? We're talking book signings stuff. Anyone have anything coming up?
I do. I actually have a release that comes out October 4th. So that's like a week-ish away from now. It's an anthology, Christmas anthology. We're all starting to
Ooh,
get in the mood, right? This one's called Christmas Forevermore. I have a story in it. So does Sally Britton, Ashton Newbold, and Karen Thornell. It's a really great collection. So that comes out in about a week. Woo!
very
Some
exciting.
pretty
So what
fabulous
you're telling
authors.
me is that we should all be buying all of our Christmas presents in October.
You guys
No,
aren't done with your Christmas
September.
shopping? No, just kidding.
Have not started. I'm
No.
thinking now. Sarah has me thinking about Christmas shopping. Okay, so my first question is let's just make sure listeners kind of have the basis of what's going on here. What is the difference between a book signing and a book event? Who can tell me that? Because I'm kind of confused at times.
Well, I can give it a shot, and then other people can correct me. Book signings are usually held in the bookstore, and that is all it is. It is authors signing books. Events can be much broader. They are often held in an unusual location, and they do involve book signing, but very often they involve other things as well. There may be food, there may be games, there may be special giveaways, or especially if they're ticketed. Some events are ticketed, and if they're ticketed, then the participants usually leave with something that you can't get unless you go to the event. Did
I
I
think she
cover
nailed
that right?
it.
Did I get
I
it?
think she
Okay,
did too.
okay. 10 out of 10
I
for
feel,
me this morning.
yes, I feel so much more informed now. Thank you, Sean. Okay, so I know the first time the four of us did a book signing together, I guess it was about a year and a half ago now. We were all shocked at how long the lines were. Like, we were honestly apologizing to everyone because it was like almost 2 hours before we saw the end of the line. Um, so we know that's not normal, like for most people. So what should authors expect when they first start having book signings? Because I know my first one did not have a line that lasted for 2 hours.
No, mine didn't even have a line. so, so I would say that if it's your first book signing, it really depends on if you're there by yourself or if you're there with other authors. A group of authors will bring more people in, obviously. And if you're there by yourself, then and it's your first book, not many people will know about you. So it's okay if not a lot of people come. Just encourage your family members. If you have a large family, you'll have a large line.
Depending on how much your family loves you.
That's true. That is true.
Isn't that awful? I determine how much you love me by how often you show up at a book signing.
Yes. How long
That's
you're
not
willing to
pressure.
stand in a line.
I think some of the best advice I got as a brand new writer. It's my first books, my first book signings. And I wish I could remember who told me because it's brilliant advice. Said especially early on, your book signings aren't about selling books. Your book signings are about getting to know bookstore staff. They're about having a chance to interact with the staff. So it's much more about that because you aren't going to have a lot of readers or customers who come because they don't know you yet. You're still growing. But long after your book signing is over, bookstore staff sell your books. And so getting to know them, getting to understand the different stores that you're at is really more what it's about. You're making connections more than you're selling books. And that helped me not panic or be super discouraged when my first many signings, no one came. It was me and the staff and a lot of customers doing their best to stay as far away from my table as possible. So it helped me feel a lot less discouraged.
Yeah. And I think kind of following with that, one of the first things that I normally do when I would go into a book signing, and I'll still do this, is I'm like, where's the restroom? It's not because I necessarily need the restroom. It's because somebody at some point is going to walk in, think I work there, and say, where's the restroom? And I'm like, oh, okay, so it's just, all the way back on the far left. And I'm like, by the way, I'm actually not working here. I'm an author, and then they all feel embarrassed. So I don't even normally tell them that. I just let them think that I'm an author, that I'm a staff member. And I used to wear like a little tag that said Traci Abramson author, and yeah, that everyone just assumed I was trying to tell them where the restroom was. So
hey, it gives you a job, right? Because I think
there we
that's our
go.
like number one worry, I think, as an author is you get there and you'll be awkward and sit there and do nothing. And I've definitely had book signings that went that way. And then other ones with you guys that have had long, long lines. And sometimes you don't know exactly what to expect. Again, like Sarah said, if you're brand new, probably don't expect a super long line. But I still think they're worth doing because I think it gives you a chance to practice for when you will end up with longer lines. It gives you a chance to have friends and families come see you in your setting, I guess. So I guess when you're starting out for authors, I would say don't worry about it if you don't have a long line. Take whatever you can from the book signing and use it for your next one. And there's a lot of things that go into how many people show up at a book signing, the location, how many times you've signed in that area before, how many new books you have had out since your last signing. So it's funny how I thought I had gotten to a point in my career where now I would always have at least a little bit of a line. But then after not having a lot of releases for a while, suddenly my lines have gotten shorter again. So it's not always just about like how popular or anything like that. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And so to this day, I still don't know exactly what kind of turnout will happen.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's so true because it really can vary so much both by location and like I said, how many books. I don't always love, as much as I love to go to the same places over and over again. If you've been there too recently, everyone's already they just saw you. So it's like,
oh, her again.
Exactly. Like, I don't need to talk to her. Like, man. So anyway, but it can still be fun. But all right. So for those readers who maybe have not attended a lot of book signings, what should they expect if they go to a book signing? Like, should they go early? Is it better to be at the end of the day? What do you think?
Yeah. No, I think it's hard to know because it really does depend on how big of a line there's going to be. I remember one of mine, we had a long line for an hour and a half, and then the last half hour, no one. And so, but we still had a few people show up in that last half hour, and they got to just chat with us, take pictures. Which pictures are fine at any time as long as the line isn't crazy long. But like, and as long as you ask the author. But if you're busy and you really want to go and there's only half an hour left, I say still run and go, and hopefully you'll be that lucky person that shows up just as it's dying down, and you get actually more time with the author that way.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like book signings vary a lot. If you're going to see an author who's really popular, the chances are good there will be a long line. But I've been at book signings where I have felt like I needed to apologize to those who have been in line because they've been waiting for so long. And 9 times out of 10, they are so happy and excited because they've met new friends, people who love the same books as they do. And so if you are in a situation where you go and you're in a long line, I hope you can have fun there and just be with like-minded people.
Right. I think that's really a fun thing about being in line at a book signing. Even if the person in front or in back of you is a total stranger, you have at least one thing in common. You like not only books, you like these books. So you automatically have something to talk about. So for those of us who are really awkward in social situations, that helps. I don't know if this has happened to you ladies. I'm sure it has, but readers will come to a signing with a copy of one of your books that you can tell they must have read like 20 times. Maybe not 20. I like to inflate my sense of importance in people's lives, but you can tell it's been well loved. The corners are a little bit bent and you can just tell. And I can't tell you how often people will apologize. Oh my gosh, I know it looks awful. And I've said this so many times, but you want to just be like, no. This is amazing because it means you liked the book.
That's how you want it to look.
A book to a signing that is very well loved, just know you never have to apologize for that because that does an author's heart so much good because it means someone has loved a book. I also have readers who will say they feel overwhelmed, like they don't know what to say. And we get that because I have fangirled at other people's signings, but also no, we're just happy you're there because we've all had those signings that no one shows up to. So just know we're just happy that you arrived. We've mentioned pictures. People sometimes, I've had people say, I meant to get a picture and I forgot, or I was too embarrassed to ask. Always ask. Most authors are really open to the idea of taking a picture, and it's a fun memento. I had a reader who said she goes to signings, and when the author's okay with it, takes a picture, then prints out that picture and sticks it on the inside cover of that book to like be a memento of having met that author. So I thought that was a really cute idea I'd never heard of before. So there's an idea for you readers. That's something you can try.
That's awesome. And another thing too is, especially if you have an unusual name, if you want it personalized, sometimes bookstores will have like sticky notes and pens for you, but you put like a sticky note or a piece of paper with your name inside. It's like so much easier for the author to be like, because then we can, instead of saying, all right, spell that again, we're talking to you and have that extra moment, to spend with the reader that we want to meet you too. So it's, so anyway, and also a lot of times I know all of us have been through this where we have people come through that they come to a lot of our signings and we're like, oh my gosh, we know them, but sometimes remember the name, sometimes you don't. So please forgive us. We may have met a lot of like 1,000 people since we saw you last. So
and in that moment, sometimes the mind just goes blank.
It does.
Yeah.
We just kind of sometimes it just kind of hits overload. So anyway. All right. So Sarah mentioned people bringing books that they already own. What do you do if someone brings in a lot of books to be signed? Is that acceptable?
I wouldn't say it's unacceptable. You just need to know coming that there are some factors that might make it so you can't get all of the books signed that you brought. So sometimes you could bring a stack and you'll get through all of them, and sometimes you won't. A lot of that has to do with time constraints. If there's a big line, or the place where it's being held is closing at a certain time, or the author has to be out by a certain time, and there's a line, then they will restrict how many books can get signed. Like, wow, this is suddenly becoming a violent book signing. So it's not that the author doesn't want to sign it. There are other issues that come into play. Sometimes if an author like me has like hand mobility limitations, sometimes they just can't sign 500 books. And so they're going to have to limit it for that reason. So most authors will want to be able to sign as many books as they can, but circumstances outside of their control may prevent that. So show up with flexible expectations, and everything works out in the end.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I'll have people do is I'm like, all right, if you bring a whole stack and there's a line, it's like, let me sign like 3 or 5 of them, and then if you're willing to stay, I'm more than happy for you to get back in the line, and I'll do again, And so I've had people do that where they've gone through the line 3 or 4 times just so that I would do it. I'm like, that's great, but then the person right behind them isn't getting frustrated, especially if that person behind them is like juggling 3 kids and
yes,
their books they just bought and everything else. So
maybe it's situational awareness.
Exactly.
Just keep an eye on how things are playing out.
Right. Okay, so what are some of your favorite memories from your book signings?
There are so many great ones. One that happened a few months ago. I guess it's been a while ago, but it still seems recent. It was when Traci, Sarah, and I were in Dallas, actually doing a book signing for our cookbook. And we had a mother and daughter arrive, and they had driven, it had been a couple of hours, I think, they had driven to get there. And they came in and they brought a quilt that the young daughter had made. It was a pieced quilt, and on the pieces she had embroidered quotes from the Jonquil series. So the entire quilt was like the Sarah Eden Jonquil memorial. It was amazing. So amazing.
It was so cool.
It was so fun to see how much she loved those books and how real Sarah's characters were to her. And so that was a really, really fun memory. And then there are smaller things, it doesn't have to be a big thing like that. For me, very often, if somebody will come through the line and tell me, I read your book when I was in the hospital going through a really hard time. That's when writing it is worth it. That's when you feel like you've touched someone's life in a good way. And so those little moments that happen every once in a while at a signing are huge.
Yeah, I think there is just something magical about seeing the face of the people who are reading your books, because sometimes you wonder, like, is this worth it? Or, you know, so like having people be like, not only are they reading my books, they're coming somewhere, sometimes driving a ways to get here to get them signed. They are having an impact. And that's a really cool thing as an author. Some of my specific like favorite things have been actually reconnecting with people that I haven't seen for a long time. I've had one family that from when I lived in Texas that just happened to be nearby at a site in Utah. And so like, and they weren't necessarily, when we knew them in Texas, it was before I wrote. I had talked to the mom on Facebook about this genre that she had never heard of. She didn't know there were like these sweet romances. And so I had kind of introduced her into the genre, and she showed up at this book signing, and for all I knew, she was still in Texas. And so like just those surprise moments were so fun. I've reconnected with college roommates. I've reconnected with, I guess, the daughter of one of my high school friends, you know? So I mean, like she came because her mom connected. And so like, just those, like those moments when you're like somebody, you get a chance to see someone that if I wasn't writing, I wouldn't have maybe even seen again in my lifetime. So those are some of my favorite memories.
I love that.
That's awesome. I think probably one of my favorite, it was me being maybe a little mischievous, even though I didn't have anyone encouraging it at that moment, was I walked in one time, I was having a signing with Greg Luke, and somebody passed me a book, and it was Greg's book, and I accidentally signed it. And so then he ended up signing one of mine. So fast forward a few years later, he had a new book out while I was at one of my book signings, and I was like, And so I pulled off one of the books, and I'm like, I got one of the little autograph by the author stickers, and I just said, Traci was here on the outside of it. I just wrote it on that, and I just signed the inside of the book and just said, Traci was here. Greg wants me to sign his book or something like that. And I just did one copy, but the staff was dying. They're just like cracking up. So then fast forward 6 months later or whatever, I'm sitting at a book event, and I hear Sean laughing so hard I think she's crying.
I think I was crying.
I think you were crying because she and Sarah had come to this book event, and everyone didn't know they would be there. Esther would have been there. I think she had her son's birthday party was going on at that point, but they were signing my books, and I'm like, I can't even get mad because I did it to somebody else. So they're like signing. I was like, oh well, you weren't here, or we didn't know you'd be here, so we didn't bring your books. And so they started having Sean and Sarah sign my books. So those are different, you know, like you've got my autograph, and then you have Sarah and Sean, and clearly they need to all find Esther so that we have all of us.
That's right.
There, so, but that cracked me up.
I think anytime an author can have fun at a signing, it's nice because signings are stressful. I've been doing this for a long time, and I still am nervous before signings because you don't know if people will show up. You don't know how it's going to go. Because we've all had signings that no one came to. So we're reliving those moments on our way to every signing. I think some of my favorite moments I've had people who have FaceTimed in friends or family members who live out of state or couldn't come. And so they got to be part of, you know, that moment and that experience. And I love seeing how people connect to each other through books. I think it's one of the most wonderful things about books. And so to see it happening in real time is really, really fun. And I've had a lot of book signings where people will come through the line and they'll say, I actually don't know anything about your books, but I had a young man, probably college age. He says, but my sister loves them. So I thought I would come and see if I could get her a book or something for Christmas. And then you're like, oh my gosh, you're the best brother ever. Have swag, take all the bookmarks you want. Like, you're trying to hook them up because it's such a sweet moment. Or I've had husbands who came and said, my wife wanted to be here so bad. She ended up getting called into work. She was so heartbroken. She doesn't know I'm here, but I thought I would come get. So like those moments where you see people connecting to each other with books. I love that. So those have been some of my favorite memories at signings.
That is awesome. Thank you all for sharing those. That's always so much fun. And thank you all for joining us on Between the Lines today. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. And we hope we'll see you next time.